All right. Hey everyone, it's Ricky's Rockin' Reviews, and I'm really excited because I have LP Hernandez here on the show with us. He's very gracious with his time, and he is the author of In the Valley of the Headless Men. And this is from Cemetery Gates, and it's just, very fresh. It just came out. And so LP, if you can just introduce yourself a little bit to our audience and then just talk about a synopsis of the book or anything that you think readers should hear about this.
I will definitely try. So, I go by LP Hernandez. I've been writing my whole life, but probably took it seriously in the last decade or so. So people know me. It might be from the No Sleep podcast. I have quite a few stories on there, or in my other novella, Stargazers, that came out a couple years ago. So this story I have tried to write multiple times. I think this is the fourth time I've tried to write a story with the same title in the same environment, because I found it fascinating when I stumbled across the Nahanni Valley and just the legends about it. It was something completely new to me, and I love mystery. So I thought it was the perfect place to kind of write a story where anything goes. It's an environment that very few people on earth have ever been to, so there aren't a whole lot of people to tell me that I got it wrong. um so in the previous iterations of this story, I was more concerned with the environment and I guess all of the possibilities of just different interesting things that could happen there. And I think what changed things for me in this telling of it, and what made it a better story, is changing the characters. So in this story, there are two brothers, modeled after my brother and myself. They are half brothers, so they have different fathers. I did take some creative liberties, but neither one of our fathers were very prominent in our lives. The abuse that Oscar, the brother of the main character, endures, that was creative license. That was not true, but it was used as a story device. My brother and I are very different in a lot of ways, and so these characters are as well. As I mentioned at the end of the book, my brother has dyslexia, and that's something that he struggled with in school. Dyslexia wasn't really understood all that well, and I didn't struggle so much in school, so that was always a fear of mine, um, just about the dynamic between us. Me having an easier path in life than he did. He did get the height though. He's 6'2", and I round up to 5'8". So yeah, he got the height. And so the story centers around these two brothers that are kind of reuniting following the death of their mother. Oscar finds some letters written to Joseph, the main character, from his dad, tucked away in a drawer. And Joseph's done really well to compartmentalize and not think about his dad, but he just can't resist the temptation to read these letters. And the last one mentions this place, Nahanni, and kind of in a out of the blue sort of way, but it gets him interested in it. Basically alluding to the fact that his dad was going to visit the park, and suggested if he was, looking to find himself, maybe he should go as well. So he does. He and Oscar talk about it. He reaches back to someone who's, I guess, like a best friend, but at one time had been a partner of his. They suffered a tragedy early in their relationship that is really hard to come back from. But Jillian, is someone who has always been there for him. The three go to Nahanni National Park, and when they get there, things get interesting. So I think that's enough setup. I could basically just repeat the whole story verbatim, but I think that's enough for the setup.
That's an excellent job. I did a review on my channel, and I found myself speaking really slowly because I did not want to reveal too much.
Mm,
And it's a novella, but you pack so much into here. I really did feel the weight of the relationships of the characters and also that mystery that just kept me turning the pages. And once we got to the park, like you said, like you said, anything could go.
Mhm.
And I was just, just taking it in. And it's a really fresh story. So I really enjoyed it. But so I'm kind of curious, what about that story or what about that story made you want to expand it? Like, why did you keep coming back to this story? You had a collection I think it's the Rat King collection of short stories that you did, and this is where the original story comes
Mhm.
from. Why that story and not other stories?
I just felt like I hadn't done it right. I hadn't done this place justice yet. For, if you type in the Valley of the Headless Men or the Valley of the Headless Men, you will get some, quite a few results on Google. Not a whole lot as far as books go. There is one other book that has the same title. I know nothing about the plot, but to take this big, and I feel like it's something that might become more well known in the future. Um, like, we have our kind of haunted places in America. We have our Roswells or Bermuda Triangles, Area 51s, like different. There's a haunted forest in Japan, the suicide forest.
Yeah.
There's all these places around the world that have this lore and they have these stories about them, movies made about them oftentimes. And I felt like my contribution didn't match the
Uh,
potential of this place, because you know the the lore that is available talks about, the entrance to the inner earth. It talks about, tropical vegetation like well above the Arctic Circle. um the First Nations people talked about giants that chased them away, generations ago. There's all of this possibility, and I feel like the first story I wrote, I really leaned into some of the body horror, some grossness, um, and I felt like that story, the characters were just conjured out of my brain. They weren't representative of anybody in life. So to do the story justice, I kind of pulled it from my heart in this attempt, and I think that's it made everything kind of connect. Now we do have a little bit of body horror. We do have a little bit of that same um, kind of strangeness that has been present in other stories, but then we have these characters who have these really interesting dynamics too, and all of that combined, I think, finally made it work.
I think so too. I think you really did. So what was the most difficult part to write here, would you say?
Um, I feel like sometimes when you are writing from the heart, there's um there can be a tendency to leave a little bit of too much of yourself on the page. Um, and at some point you're just writing a biography instead of maybe doing what's proper for the story. So I would find myself making some choices that were, you know as I'm doing my initial editing passes, I'm realizing, oh, I'm just spilling my guts here. This doesn't necessarily propel the story forward in the way I want. I'm just, maybe I should go see a therapist instead of writing this, particular passage. So I guess having that balance between, yes, this comes from somewhere intensely personal, but there still is a story that has to make sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And in kind of flipping that coin, so what was the most fun part for you to write?
So uh, so something I introduce in, well, there's a couple actually. So the character of Sam has been present in both iterations. There actually is a novel version of this. I wrote that in 3 weeks because I did one of those online pitch wars things, where you hashtag like, I've got this novel ready to go, and an agent wrote and asked me to send it to her, and I hadn't written it. I'd written like a quarter of it. So I was like, well, let me write this thing real quick. And it's not good. Totally different than the other iterations. But Sam, I think I had a lot more fun with him once I kind of realized what I wanted to do with him. He was almost like a ghost or an echo in previous iterations in my mind. But I think with this version of the story, I've really centralized it on how, with intent or no intent, Joseph has been at the center of these people's lives. Um, he, his relationship with Oscar, that dynamic between them is something that Oscar has carried with them, as is revealed sort of towards the end when they have one of their final conversations. And Jillian too. She is, now they're both middle-aged and she hasn't really moved on, but Joseph did. He went and had a whole other life. And so kind of using that same perspective and then imposing that on Sam, who in this place where anything can happen, that would be a spoiler to say it, but once Sam reveals his thoughts about his own origin, that was something I didn't write in my initial pass through the story. I finished the story and I was looking back, looking for some areas to add some magic, and that was one that just came to me, and I just threw it in there, and I was like, oh, I really like that.
I really like Sam. I couldn't really place him,
Mm,
and uh, he didn't he didn't know some of the things that were going on within the land, but
mhm,
he did know some things. Like he kind of
mm,
like had a feeling. He was very in touch with this piece of earth, I would just
mhm.
say. And so it was just really fascinating to see him lead the group for a section or two, And uh,
I wrote him as if he was like waking up from a dream. That's kind of like you're coming back to your senses.
yeah, he has a really like groggy feeling to him,
Mhm,
definitely. So you kind of wrote about, I mean, you kind of just talked about right now how you put a lot of, or you kind of laid everything out on the table about yourself, and then you had
mhm.
to edit and chip away some of that stuff. Was there anything that you kind of learned about yourself from writing this story? Or is this just stuff that you had in you and you felt like you had to get out?
I think I learned a pretty big lesson. I did an interview with Slay House a couple days ago, and Trevor, the host of that podcast. I think it was mentally preparing myself for his questions that got me thinking. There, you have a relationship with the story, kind of as you're writing it, and your typical interface will be, through your word processor. So you're seeing the words on the screen, and I think that creates a certain sort of distance. So when I picked the book back up, now in print, and just for whatever reason, I read like the final few chapters, and kind of just I guess, the sensation of holding the pages, reading the words, and having a little bit of separation from when I wrote them. I realized that a there there's definitely some metaphorical moments. Um, there's some things that I've intentionally hidden, but there was a whole substructure I didn't know that I'd written until I read it months after I'd like hit the end. Um, and I think that was like my subconscious kind of peeking its head up and giving me moments of um I guess just these little flourishes that I was not conscious of the moment I wrote them, and only really appreciated it when I read it, like when I held the paper.
Wow.
I don't know if I
Wow.
answered your question. I just went a whole other direction.
No, you did. That's absolutely fascinating. I've heard that that happens to people before. Just casual readers. As I mean, I'd imagine for you it's tenfold. You actually wrote it. But like
Mm,
for example, for me, when I was younger, I read A Catcher in the Rye
mhm,
at a young age, and reading it now, it is totally different. And
mm,
with the life I've lived, I'm almost 30 now. It's just a, it's still impactful, but just very, very different. And it's now I have these two experiences to compare,
mm.
but it's the exact same book. It's wild.
Yeah.
It's wild. So I can only imagine what that was like for you. And kind of like I'm a super nerd. I have X-Men on my shirt.
Mm,
Kind of like at the end of Avengers Endgame when Steve
mm.
Rogers is saying, "No, I don't think I will tell you about
Oh yeah.
life." There's some things that you just kind of have to keep to yourself. And
Mm,
I'm kind of glad that you have that. You have this kind of like you said you had like some hidden things about yourself in there that only you would recognize. I think that's
mm.
really cool. I'm an aspiring writer, so
Okay,
I'm looking up everything that you're saying. Um, I have kind of like a fun question for you. If
sure.
this were ever to be adapted into a film, um, what's something about the tone that you can say that they need to get this right? Um, like what's the most important piece of the tone to get right for this story? If
That's
it
a really
were,
interesting question. Oh my goodness. Um, so I think, despite it clocking in at, I don't know, at like 130-ish, 125, somewhere around their pages, I think it still is kind of a slow burn. Like
yeah.
um the scenes aren't super dynamic. And so I think the tone of that there's always the potential of danger, which I give kind of, I would say I kind of hint at early when they've arrived to the valley and Jillian's kind of gone off to take pictures. And then Oscar's got this large knife, which Joseph didn't know that he had packed. It's nothing they discussed or he'd seen. And Oscar just acts a little bit different in that moment. And so for me, that was kind of my way of setting a little bit of the tone. Um, I think it's dread would be the what underlies everything with Oscar beginning to um, sort of reenact some of his past as a drug user or to appear to be being affected, like the scene where he feels or he believes that he's vomiting, like he's going through withdrawals.
Mhm.
And then Jillian with her the device that she finds and stumbles across, I think. And then Sam too with the mentions of he's starting to slowly fall apart. I think all of that, there's no real jump scares. It's all going to be a tone of dread, like I'm at the top of the world and I don't really understand the people that are with me like I thought I did.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And kind of like how you mentioned that it's a slow burn.
Mm,
Um, it definitely is, but I was so intrigued from the very beginning. I think it's just such a wonderful setup. And I love that setup because there's a good chunk of time between when the story starts, when they're grieving with their mother, or for their mother,
mhm,
I should say. And by the time they get to Nahanni, and you do a lot of really interesting things as far as like Pilot Bob and the locals that live just outside of that area before they have to take the plane.
mhm,
There's a lot of setup or at least like intrigue that you kind of plant as to like what has been seen there by the locals. And Joseph's thinking like, what am I getting myself into, kind of.
mhm.
And yeah, I really enjoyed that part. So it was very promising and it definitely delivered. So
Well, thank you.
I really like that part. Um, so is there anything in your writing that you feel like, not necessarily in your writing, but anything about being a writer or what you try to do that you feel kind of hinders you, that's something you still need to overcome? Whether that be like time or, just getting in a zone. It could be anything.
um I wish I could had the freedom. I won't say freedom because that's something I could claim if I wanted to. um when I am focused, I can be very prolific. I wrote Stargazers in about a month, which it's like 12,000 words shorter than In the Valley of the Headless Men. But I wrote it and it's pretty close to its final form in about a month. In the Valley of the Headless Men took me about five, 5 or 6 months. I, out the gate, I got through the first 8,000 words very easily. It was very much flowing. And then it was kind of like in fits and starts. After that, I would maybe do 1,000 words in a week, and then have a week where I didn't even think about it just because of life. So I wish I could give myself the permission to take 2-3 hours just to sit down and write. Some of that writing, I write where I can get it. So sometimes it's at lunch at work. And a lot of that is reorienting yourself to the world you've created. For me, I'm kind of a hybrid between plotting and pantsing. I do some loose plotting. So mine is like sticky notes, kind of basics for every chapter. I give myself a roadmap to start with, and then I can move things around. But it is hard to try to get in the zone of writing, like when I've been working for 5 hours now. Oh, I'm going to write for 10 minutes. So hardest thing for me is just claiming the time that I need to do it. Yeah, in a way that keeps me in the zone.
Yeah, yeah, I'm absolutely there with you. I can definitely see there's just not enough hours in the day for everything that we
Mm.
want to do. Yeah. But I mean, I'm glad that you got over any of that, anything that was blocking you because you're coming out with some really good stuff. And I've become a really big fan. Um, so how often do you read when you do get a chance to read? Because, I've always heard before that, in order to become the best writer you can be, you got to be sampling other people's writing,
Mhm.
and just trying to lock into the empathy that other authors create with their stories and with their characters. So I'm kind of curious to see how often you read.
So reading, when I had COVID a couple weeks ago, I got through 2 books in one day in my sickest day. So that's atypical. I have I have books for different places. I have my workbook, I have my bed book, I have kind of geographically. And so in that way, it does take me a while to get through it, but I would say I average probably 2 to 3 books a month. Definitely, I have my own podcast, so I do read a lot. Um, in consideration of having guests come on.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I'd say about 2 to 3 on a good month, four books.
That's cool. Yeah, that's how I average as well. And it's funny that you mentioned, that you have like a geographically put your books as to where you're going to be. I do have
Mhm.
a Kindle for when I'm in bed. That's
Yeah.
that's the way to go when you're in bed. You can lay down, it's super lightweight. You can
Mm,
just the lighting, it's awesome.
mm.
So yeah, I'm kind of similar with you there. So who are some of your favorite authors, whether it be like, the classic authors from before or any like current new authors?
I, I'm gonna say his name second because he's always mentioned first. So I'll start with Robert McCammon, who wrote some of my favorite books: Boy's Life, top three book of mine, Gone South, um, Mystery Walk, and obviously Stephen King. I read Carrie at the age of 10.
Wow.
And that just because the cover was the Sissy Spacek movie version where she's covered in blood. And I was like, I wonder if my mom will let me get this. And she did. So that got me started at a young age. For people now, man, it's there's so many. I feel like I could tell you 50 authors I've read one book from and been blown away. But as far as like having that same history or that same resume, I think that's forthcoming. But I couldn't say anyone has um, that I've read 50 books of like I have for Stephen King. Um, Lately, I just finished, let's see, Mosaic by Catherine McCarthy. That was my first book of hers. That was really good. Um, Last year, I read Conjuring the Witch by Jessica Leonard. I thought she had her her little writing flares and different metaphors, just different ways she would present certain situations. I thought was handled in a really different way than I've ever seen. I have one beside me right now, V. Castro, who I consider a friend. Um, I've read several of her books, and I always find some nuggets in there that I'll end up kind of like putting a star next to it. I butcher my books. I write in them. I mark them all up. Um, yeah, those are some of the recent ones. And then there's, you know, so many of my friends are really talented authors. Johnny Compton, Max Booth, Grace Reynolds, the poet, Celso Hurtado. I have a long list of it's a weird place to be in because for a long time I felt like I was on the outside looking in, and now just to casually drop their names like, oh yeah, I know them, but the stuff they put out is I'm very fortunate to consider them friends.
That's awesome, and that's really cool because now you're helping other people get to know these different authors. I don't think I've heard of them before. So, when
Mm.
I watch this back, I'm definitely going to be looking into their stuff. So that's really awesome. That's part of the reason I have this channel is because I just want to get as much eyes on some of the things that I like so that I can have people to talk to about these
Sure.
things. Yeah. Um, I'm kind of curious, what do you think about book covers? Because, they always say don't judge a book by its
Mhm.
cover, but I definitely judge a book by its cover. That's the first thing that grabs me. So how important is it to you when you're coming up with your stories to nail the cover art?
So Joe from Cemetery Gates is a fantastic, and he let me have full creative control over this. So I had my own artist who is the artist that also did the Rat King, and then my own formatter, or not my own formatter. Um, I was able to pick my formatter, and we were all three of us able to work together to get this cover concept, which I love it. I think it's very important, probably too much so. And I would take Sadie Hartman's advice on that, Mother Horror. It's something that she's been very vocal about. It's a product. At the end of the day, what's going to make you pick a book up? You don't know the words in the page until you've started reading it. So you have to judge the book by its cover. And I've seen some unfortunate, when you're looking at the cover and it's just not clear, like what the tone or even what the central image is, then I think you're missing the mark, because if that is sitting next to, like, I'll pick it up again, something like that.
Hmm. Yeah, I see
Uh,
that skull in there. That's
yeah, the details,
cool.
that it's beautiful. It's so I think for a I'm an indie author, so I have I think a little more creative control. Maybe if I end up with one of the big publishers, some of that'll be taken away. But for my next collection, No Gods Only Chaos, I made that with the cover artist, and then this one, I'm just fortunate that I was able to find these people, and they enjoy working with me. And so far, nobody has said no. So, but I guess if I get it wrong, then I've kind of doomed myself because I'm the person making the choices.
Yeah, well, knock on wood. They've
Yeah.
been cool so far. I went out and got the Stargazers book, and that looks really sick too. And kind of like what you were saying for the idea of what makes a good cover, the In the Valley of the Headless Men cover, you kind of have this like prehistoric looking animal, this ram,
Mhm.
and he's got like these dead eyes and he's kind of munching on something and there's just kind of like all this negative space is really cool.
So I can give you a spoiler. If anybody's curious, I would say tune out for the next 10 minutes, or not 10 minutes, I'm
Uh-oh.
sorry, 15 seconds. So if you, that ram, it's mentioned in the book, off to the side, there is a fallen ram,
Hmm.
very subtle, and then he is eating the flesh. So that is the relationship between the two brothers, kind of captured in.
Oh, damn. Oh man, I didn't even think of that. That's phenomenal. Man, that's awesome. So now when I get to read this story again, I'm gonna pick up other things.
Mm.
Oh, so cool.
So Jeff Perrell did the formatting, and Brett Bouillon is the artist.
Phenomenal. Do they have Instagram accounts?
They're included in the book. I mean, they're, yeah.
Okay, cool. All right, I'll check them out and I'll put them in the description as well. That's awesome. That's so cool. Um, Something I kind of always wonder when you're finished with the story with the writing project. do you feel like a weight off your shoulders? Is it like, does writing exhaust you or does it energize you? Are you like ready for the next thing? What is that process like when you finish?
So for this one, I think I alluded to it about that kind of subconscious processing I was doing that I became aware of after the fact, actually very recently. So reading those final chapters, and I won't spoil it, but really the last page of the book, what one person, a message one person gives to another person, I realized that was me giving myself permission to be okay where I'm at in life. Because a lot of Joseph is modeled after fears, worries, thoughts about myself. So for this story, I think it was kind of, you know, it was definitely a purge. I definitely left a lot of myself in the book, and I may not have been conscious when I hit the final period. Um, but I think it was a sense of relief. Like I've gotten this out of my system. I've kind of um done a little bit of processing I wasn't even wholly aware of in the moment. But yeah, after that, the mind quickly pivots to like promotion and, really having the next project ready. Because if I've learned anything, it's like if you have a little bit of success, people are going to say, "What else do you have? What else do you have?"
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Um, and so wow, this is really good insight. What what would you what advice would you give for any aspiring writers out there? Um, just anything fresh off the top of your head.
Um, so I think there is kind of a path that you can follow that there are some people that are gonna their first novel that's just gonna blow people away. Like I mentioned, Johnny Compton with the Spite House. That wasn't his first writing ever, but I wouldn't say he came out of nowhere, but he dropped a bomb, I guess, a little bit on the literary world, and that happens every now and then. But for me, it started off with some maybe less than reputable publishers, some of those places that they make money off of people buying copies of the book for like family and friends, and there's no editing done. They don't pay you anything. So I paid my dues in that way, getting stories printed that shouldn't have been printed because they weren't very good. Um, but from there, you have like your pro paying level. So more 5 cents a word or higher. And then you have your sub pro pay. There are still some good publishers in the sub pro pay market, and they put together nice books. They're just, financially, they're not able to pay you 5 cents a word. So I got a couple of stories at that level, getting 30, 40, $50 a story. But, they might, in a collection like that, bring in one big name. And so now you can say, oh, I've been in a book with, Richard Chismar from Cemetery Dance, or, someone well above you in the writing world. And then from there, once you have a couple of those, or at least this is how I did it, a couple of those under your belt, start looking towards the pro pay. And there are places, Horror Tree, Submittable, or Submission Grinder, where you can see all of the upcoming calls, and you can kind of plan your next few months of writing, how much they pay, what the theme is. Sometimes they even have like response time, rejection rates, all that stuff. And you can understand how competitive you're going to be. If you're going for something pro pay, that's like, you know, some people pay 10 cents a word now, you're going to have a lot of competition. If it's below that level, if you're getting 40 or $50, then your competition might be a quarter, a fifth of your competition for that other market. So starting small and then just building. Some of it's going to be luck, and I would say interacting with people on Facebook, if you, or not Facebook, I'm sorry, social media, just in general, like you're doing right now, reaching out. And if you loved a book, tell an author. A lot of the indie authors, that we may only hear it a few dozen times for one book. We're not Stephen King, that we will automatically get 50,000 reviews regardless of how good a book is. So yeah, I'd say start small, and but dream big.
Wow. Definitely going to consider that. And I feel like everyone else watching will as well if they have any, dreams of writing. And just honestly, thank you so much for taking some time to be on the channel. There are some sentences that you wrote in here that stay with me, that have stayed with me. So it's just really cool to get to talk to you. So right before we sign off, is there anything you want to bring attention to for the viewers? Where can people follow you? What do you got going on?
I'm either the LP Hernandez or author LP Hernandez most places. I have my next short story collection, which has some stories that have been on the No Sleep podcast. It has my first pro paying stories, 8 reprints, 5 originals. That collection is called No Gods, Only Chaos, and that'll come out this summer. We're looking June, July, and that'll be through Darklit Press.
Cool. That sounds awesome. I'm gonna be there for it. And I think I saw on your Instagram that you have the Ghoulish Festival
Mhm.
that's going on. It's in March 15th, I think.
Yes, and you should come since I just realized how close we are.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
went there the first year I was a patron. And so I was on, walking around talking to authors, and I felt so energized, going to the different panels they put on. Then the next year I was behind the table as a vendor, and just, it's such a great experience, great people. And yeah, I'll be there, and then I'll be at AuthorCon, and then I'll be at StokerCon.
Cool. That's awesome. All right. Thanks everyone for watching, and go ahead and subscribe to LP on all his stuff and check out his awesome books. He's got a lot. So there's something for everyone. Thanks again, LP, and I'll be seeing you at the festival.
Thank you.
All right.